It's 4:55, July 7th, 2026. Beautiful day, San Diego. As usual, I am just going to let the environment talk. I was sitting earlier at the tree that shows a very familiar pattern of spectacles. I took pictures. Feeling a little energetic today, so I want to walk around. And as we walk around, one thing I sort of have started noticing is the negative space between everything. So most of the time, most of us, at least most of my life, I went around not looking at space at all. I would look at things, look at objects, and I would, so right there, that's the tree with the spectacles. So the sun is at a position in the sky where it's casting a perfect sort of shadow, which creates the eyeglass effect. So I just want to show you that. See that? That's like a perfect eyeglass, right? Like as if somebody's wearing spectacles. Now, if you sit here, obviously the sun is above. So I'm gonna sit in this spectacle, and the sun is like right there. It's really kind of neat, this whole tree. And then, you look around and you see these DNA-shaped helical structures just lying around, like just as if the DNA has just been scattered around from the tree. I mean, this is the tree itself. You can see the complex DNA structure that it forms, double helix. But it's more complex than a double helix, right? It's like, look at this. Now, if you believe in the idea of a creator, somebody who created this tree, I mean, every tree is different, I get that. But I think this tree is special in the sense that it's suggesting, to me at least, that there is potential to our DNA. There are combinations possible to DNA that we have not yet explored. We probably aren't even close to exposing. I mean, the human DNA, the human genome is very, very complex to begin with. It's an extremely complex genome as far as when we first mapped it. We're still trying to understand the capabilities that bacteria have, right? I've written about that. So to understand the full capabilities of the human genome is a challenge. And then once you understand that, these trees seem to be saying that there are more possibilities, more things, more combinations that you can do with the human genome. It doesn't just have to be a double helix. I guess that's sort of, that's That's sort of interesting, wasn't it? So that's what I was doing before I came here. I was looking at negative space and the collapsing of dimensions from three-dimensionals. If you take away depth, what happens to the shapes that are formed, right? So I've been coming here regularly. Now, some of you have already noticed that this particular branch structure looks like a puppy, right? I mean, this right here is the head of the puppy. This is the back side of the puppy, and these branches seem to be holding the puppy from the middle, right? So isn't that interesting? Like as if the tree is holding a puppy and right over water, and the puppy wants to drink some water. So some of you pointed that out to me, the first time you guys saw it. Thanks for doing that. I had not noticed that until, I started talking about these pair of glasses here. Until I started talking about these glasses, and I was focused on those, I did not notice this particular shape. Some of you did, obviously, when you watched the video and immediately marked it. And when I went home and saw that video again, I was like, wow, yeah, that's, how come I didn't see that? Yes. But I mean, I am sort of amused by this whole idea that somebody's looking at us. The trees are looking at us, or somebody's looking at us, I'm kind of amused by that. And this particular eyeglasses are in negative space. They don't, it's not branches forming them, although this particular branch seems to be sort of forming them. But these eyeglasses are negative space glasses, and it's a clear sort of a interesting message that I'm looking at you. This eyeglass, this particular thing is just like the tree formation, right? It's also an eyeglass, but it's not negative space. It's made with, the trunk and the branches. When you become aware, or when I become aware of negative space, I try to, in my mind, calculate or try to figure out what the negative space is showing me or trying to show me. But it's very difficult because most of open areas are filled with negative spaces. And we are not taught from childhood to look correctly at this world. We are taught, oh, look, that's a plant. And that's what we look at. Nobody says, oh, look at the negative space between these rocks here. And look at the shape this negative space is forming with that rock, and look at that, right? Nobody says that. Nobody says that's how you should look at the world. You should look at both things, right? You should look at that rock, and then you should look at the negative space between the rocks, right? Like the whole negative space, this whole thing sort of forms, if you look around, it kind of forms a U kind of shape, right? But sitting here, we don't notice the U shape. We only notice the water. We notice, you know, the rocks, the plants, but not the space and the shape the space is forming. We don't notice that. I fed these turtles and fish earlier today. They were they seem to have developed a liking for the sweetness in fruits. Today I gave them a pear. The pear was a little overripe, so it had the sugar had sort of ripened, and there was abundance of it in the pear, and they just tore it apart. Like really, the turtles went for it. The fish too. The fish loved it. Then I fed them an apple, and they weren't that interested in the apple. It wasn't as sweet as the pear was. So I had found this out a long time ago, that turtles have a very long lifespan because I don't know if that's a because statement. I don't know if there's causality there, but I know that they live very long. And one of the unique things about turtles is that they are carnivores in the younger part of their life. And then as they get older, they become herbivores. First, they become omnivores, and then as they get older, they become herbivores. They just eat, plants and shoots and things like that, underwater plants, algae, etc. I did not know that until I read that somewhere, and for a while I wondered, was that the secret to their lifespan? And if so, why might that be the case? Why might becoming a herbivore later in life be better for them? Now you can Google it. I mean, you'll see what I'm saying. It's not, it's not just me saying it. I Googled it several times just to be sure. I was I don't trust everything I read on the internet. There are actually papers at the National Institute of Health which talk about this. One of the theories, and this is, almost 20 years ago, one of the theories had to do with the changing gut biome. Now, most of us are familiar with the bacteria in our intestines and, small intestine, large intestine, stomach. We have bacteria, and most of them are good bacteria, although some are suppressed bad bacteria. But most of the bacteria in our gut are good bacteria, at least in a healthy person. We have other things as well. We have yeast, we have, fungus, different types of microbial fungus in our gut and so on. And because we eat yeast-based products, we also have yeast in our stomachs as well. So beer, we drink beer, and that's why some people get a beer belly. It's because of the overgrowth of yeast in our gut. Bread has yeast, although if you bake the bread, most of the yeast gets killed off. But in order to ferment the bread, we use yeast. And for the people who are inclined to ferment the bread using store-bought yeast, I discovered that some of those yeast are very, very, how shall I say, potent, in the sense that they are extremely strong. They're not natural. They're produced genetically for the sake of fermenting the bread. So you put those yeast into the dough, and immediately within like 5 or 10 minutes, the dough just puffs up, and it's ready to go into the oven. Before we had store-bought yeast, there was the method to bake bread was using a sourdough starter kit. So there is a sourdough starter, which is basically a small collection of older sourdough, and you just take that starter and you add it to the new bread, and the yeast from the old sourdough ferments the new bread. And before we started doing sourdough starters, there was this lack of anything. We would just keep flour overnight, and it would on its own just puff up. That's called wild yeasting. So you just, from nature, there's yeast all around us, and we don't notice it. Just like there's bacteria all around us, and we don't notice it. And so if you leave flour out overnight, the yeast from your home, from the environment, from just wherever, it goes into the bread, and the bread puffs up, and you can use that, and you can just put it into the oven. It's natural, nothing wrong with it at all. And I prefer that because I don't like buying store-bought yeast. It's like buying Viagra to get an erection. Why would I do that? I would rather it happen naturally or not happen at all. And in my case, most of the time it doesn't happen at all. See that hourglass shape over there? That's pretty interesting, isn't it? In negative space, just an hourglass, like somebody's measuring time while somebody here is watching us. Isn't that cool? But anyway, getting back to bacteria, there is good bacteria in our gut, and it's called the biome. Um, what I found later was that the biome extends from the gut into the lungs, and from the lungs it extends into the brain. It's called um, the human biome axis, and it exists in almost all parts of the body, but specifically in the gut to the lungs to the brain. That's a very specific track of the biome. So within the brain, within the gut and within our lungs are pretty much the same, I would suppose, bacteria, with probably some differences because they serve different functions. In the gut, you need to digest food. In the lungs, you need to breathe air and keep the lungs moisturized. In the brain, the biome does different functions as well. I don't exactly know what the biome does in the brain, but I know they exist in the brain. I don't know what they do. They might be involved in the dreaming process as well. Now, are they quantumly linked to humans in some way? That is a very interesting question, and I suspect they're doing research on it. We have trillions of microorganisms within our body, and if trillions of organisms are quantumly linked to us, that makes for a fascinating discovery. And also, why are they quantumly linked to us? What is the meaning of that? What function do they do to the human body and mind in addition to the human genome itself? The human genome is also not very well understood. Then the interactions between the gut biome, the lung biome, and the mind biome is also not very well understood. And then if you combine these trillions of potentially quantumly linked organisms to the human genome, how does it all interact together in a amazing symphony that seems to provide us with consciousness and with the ability to see the world? I mean, it's really like it's a really amazing experience to be alive. And then, of course, there's the mystery of death. The human biome stays within the body for the most part, while life leaves the body at death. And what happens after that, no one really knows. I guess what I'm saying is there are a lot of mysteries in this world. We don't truly understand, or we don't observe enough. We're not in awe of creation, I suspect, is the correct way of phrasing what I intend to say. It's an extraordinary thing to be alive on this planet and to observe and be self-aware, and then to notice the other mysteries like motion of Earth, rotation, revolution, tectonic plates. Then to notice that the sun itself revolves around the galaxy is in motion itself in the universe, and yet I can sit here and feel like nothing is moving at all. I can see the wind and feel like the leaves are moving, but I'm not moving. And yet everything is in such amazing amount of motion. And that's just the beginning of the mystery, right? I mean, there is the human body itself and the mystery that it has that I just described. There's far more, mysteries within the human body, including the immune system, the adaptation mechanisms, and so on. Our ability to walk is really interesting. But if you move past the human body and you go into, quantum mechanics and you go into subatomic particles and the smallest, particles become waves, and you go into those details, and then you realize that all of that is also very mysterious. I think Alan Watts said, what is it? It's wavicles, sure, but what is it? And, it doesn't get through to somebody or to a scientist until you keep asking that question. Yes, I understand it's a quantum wave, but what is it? It's a quantum wave. It's a quantum wave. Yes, I understand, but what is it? I suspect that if Alan was alive, he would find that very amusing. I'm sure he's out there somewhere. Don't you agree? Somewhere out there. Saying, what is it? So when I, try to observe and just look at everything from that perspective, from the perspective of the smallest particles that are either waves or particles, the fact that they cease being waves once an observer arrives, whether the observer is mechanical or whether the observer is, biological consciousness, it doesn't seem to matter as long as there's an observer. And when I say observer, when I say a mechanical observer, I'm talking about a camera. As soon as an observer arrives, the waves within subatomic particles seem to make up their mind and say, all right, I'm going to now become a particle. And I'm going to make up my mind, and I'm going to decide my orbit within this particular structure. And the probabilities collapse, and suddenly everything becomes real. In a way, it is real, but it becomes more real. Let's put it that way. And it doesn't matter what sort of observer it is. It could be a mechanical camera. And I'm talking about pre-cameras, before cameras had artificial intelligence in them, before my camera had Siri in it. Just a regular camera, as long as there was a regular camera, the waves would become particles. I thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Why would a mechanical camera have the same effect as a biological consciousness? By implication, the mechanical camera itself had some sort of consciousness, no? That would be one of the possibilities. You can't discount that. So what does it mean that a mechanical camera has, the same effect? Somebody doesn't want me to talk about this. All right. They keep, making motions at their throat like stop talking. I think I was getting too technical there. probably somebody in me who is more inclined to be a physicist and more inclined to be scientific. No, it's not. It's not a problem. It's just, I seem to take on the personalities of whoever is in me. Sort of like negative space accepts everything. It's kind of interesting. I haven't been given the choice of who is my companions, who are my companions. I haven't been given the choice of who I can allow to come inside me or not allow. So it's always good when, somebody inside me starts gesturing and saying, cut it out, just stop talking. I'm gonna just let my consciousness expand out into the environment. Sometimes when I sit this way, in a purely observational mode, my connection to consciousness to space, to the environment, to all of it, is through my breath. If you truly believe in not just in the work of creation, but in the presence of creation, it's not a belief per se. You just have to look around. You have to see how beautiful it is. And that everything seems to be infused with something that's conscious. It's not just that young man who is conscious. Everything is conscious. And that presence is also something that is the work of creation or creator, right? That sort of consciousness. So when I breathe, my very breath puts me in touch with whoever created this, doesn't it? It's an extraordinarily intimate suggestion, and it's not limited to me. Every animal breathes. And breathing and lungs are not the most efficient or adaptive solutions to life. They are actually, in some ways, hindrances, right? Think of how fragile the breath is. You try stopping breathing, and you'll realize immediately how much you need air. I'll just leave you with this suggestion. First of all, it's very fragile. Secondly, it's a very intimate thing. If you believe in the idea that creation itself is conscious. And if you then go metaphysical and extend into speculation, why would the Creator create fragility and intimacy in the same breath? What's the message? I no longer believe in the suggestion that sometimes there is no message, that things just are the way they are. I don't believe that anymore. Whoever created this symphony, it's a you know, it's too perfect for there not to be a message in everything, right? So what is the message of intimacy and fragility at the same time? I pondered that, you know. Why would the Creator make human beings vulnerable and yet suggest that there is an intimacy? And this is the very environment that we are intent on destroying. Think about that. This is the very environment, the very breath that we want to throw pollution in. We want to burn oil in. We want to burn gasoline in. This is the environment we are bent on ruining. The fragility and the intimacy, we are bent on ruining it. Isn't that true? Ask yourself. And it's not just limited to America, it's all over the world. That's why turtles are fascinating. They can breathe underwater. They can't breathe underwater. They have to come out. But they can certainly stay underwater for a long time by holding their breath. They don't need to come out every so often. That turtle is just swimming underwater, easily. It'll come out every now and then. I don't have the answers, man. All I got is videos and merch. Oh wait, hummingbird? Is that hummingbird over there? Where'd it go? It's right there. Very tiny. Once it flies, you'll see it. Right now, it's difficult to see it. Right on that branch, sitting there. Well, I will log off. Hope you have a great evening. Take care.